The war room is already full when someone says the line every security leader quietly fears. It's fine, we'll just restore from backup.
The ransomware note is on the screen. Chat channels are exploding. Executives are asking for recovery time estimates, and every answer feels thinner than anyone wants to admit. People open backup dashboards, check runbooks, and scan snapshot lists, but a heavier question settles over the room. Has anyone ever seen this scale of restore actually work, end to end, under pressure?
Suddenly, the phrase, "we have backups," feels less like a plan and more like a bet that has never been called.
You are listening to Backup Betrayal, Ransomware versus Recovery Plans No One Tested, part of the Wednesday headline feature from Bare Metal Cyber magazine, developed by Bare Metal Cyber. In this conversation, we are looking past the comforting green lights on backup consoles and asking what leaders really need to know. Can the organization recover fast enough, clean enough, and predictably enough to protect customers, revenue, and trust when ransomware hits?
For years, "we have backups" has been an easy way to end uncomfortable risk conversations. Backup jobs complete. Storage usage looks fine. A slide somewhere shows multiple copies of critical data in different locations. It sounds like resilience. But when you ask basic, time-bound questions, that confidence often starts to wobble. Which applications are truly critical in the first 24 hours? How long does it actually take to restore the full stack, not just one database? What level of data loss creates regulatory problems, revenue impact, or reputational damage?
In many organizations, no one has tested answers. They have assumptions dressed up as facts. One reason is cultural. Backup is often treated as operational hygiene, not as a frontline resilience capability. Teams are praised for successful backup jobs and low storage costs, not for running disruptive tests that reveal uncomfortable gaps. Runbooks exist, but many were written for audit comfort rather than crisis execution. They include optimistic recovery time objective and recovery point objective numbers. They include vague steps like restore the cluster. They assume the right experts will be available, the network will behave, and the restore sequence will be obvious. But none of that has been proven in a full-scale recovery under pressure. A green backup dashboard is not a resilience metric. It tells you certain jobs ran. It does not prove critical services can be rebuilt quickly, in the right order, with the right configurations, secrets, identity settings, and application dependencies intact.
It also does not tell you how people will behave when the first major restore fails, runs 10 times slower than expected, or brings back data that no one is sure they can trust.
That is the comfort of unproven backups. Everything looks fine until the day you actually need them.
Modern ransomware operators understand this gap, and they exploit it. Older attacks often ignored backup infrastructure. Today's attackers actively look for your lifeboats. Before they detonate ransomware, they may spend weeks or months moving quietly through the environment. They explore not just production systems, but backup consoles, storage networks, credentials, recovery documentation, and administrative tools.
Their goal is simple. When you reach for the safety net, they want you to find it already cut. The technical patterns are familiar. A compromised administrator account is used to change retention settings or disable protection for specific systems. Backup servers and media agents sit on flat networks and get encrypted along with everything else. Immutable storage turns out to be less immutable than leaders believed because it was misconfigured or shared credentials with production. Cloud snapshots exist, but no one has tied them to a tested recovery workflow. The systems the organization trusted most may have the weakest isolation and the least monitoring. For leaders, The lesson is clear. Backup and recovery infrastructure is now part of the critical attack path. It is not a quiet back-office utility. It is part of the resilience perimeter.
That means someone has to own its security posture. Who can change backup policies? How are those actions logged? Are alerts reviewed? Are backup systems isolated from production identity? How often does the organization verify that its air gaps and immutability claims still hold?
Recent ransomware incidents show the same pattern again and again. Attackers do not only encrypt production, they attack confidence in recovery.
The real test begins when an organization decides not to pay and commits to restoring instead. At that point, the first 72 hours becomes some of the most important hours of the year. Executives are on calls with customers, regulators, insurers, and the board. Everyone wants timelines. Everyone wants confidence.
Inside the technical teams, the first problem is often not tape speed or snapshot counts. It is basic clarity. What needs to come back first? Which restore points are clean? Which systems depend on which others? Which applications are truly critical and which can wait? Asset inventories are out of date. Dependency maps are incomplete. Some backups may have been taken after the attackers were already inside. Plans that looked crisp on paper dissolve into urgent questions. Then the restore jobs begin, and physics pushes back. Networks that handle normal operations may buckle under large concurrent restores. Storage systems behave in ways no one has seen outside a lab. A 4-hour recovery target may have assumed one application would be restored at a time, not identity, messaging, file services, and core business platforms all at once. Teams begin negotiating in real time. Which business unit gets priority? Which region waits? Where is the organization willing to accept more data loss in exchange for faster recovery?
Those trade-offs may be unavoidable, but they are much harder when discovered during an incident instead of rehearsed beforehand.
Decision friction makes the situation worse. Legal may want to preserve certain snapshots for possible litigation. Compliance teams may worry about reporting obligations. Insurers may have conditions around ransom decisions and recovery steps. Each voice is legitimate, but without a pre-agreed decision framework, they collide. The result is not just restore chaos, it is governance chaos. Time is lost, trust is strained, and leaders make high-stakes decisions in a fog of uncertainty. Escaping that cycle requires a mindset shift. Disaster recovery should not be treated as a static plan in a binder. It should be treated like a product. A product has customers. It has expectations. It has use cases, owners, roadmaps, and service levels. Recovery should be no different. When you treat recovery as a product, the questions change. Who are the primary customers of recovery? What services matter most during the first day of a crisis? What level of recovery speed and data loss has actually been promised? Which systems deserve premium recovery treatment, and which ones are lower priority by explicit business decision? This moves the conversation from generic reassurance to specific recovery offers. This tier of systems gets this recovery profile. This platform has this tested restoration path. This business process has this acceptable data loss window. A product also needs an owner. Somewhere in the organization, someone needs to play the role of recovery product manager, even if that is not their official title. That person connects business impact to realistic recovery tiers. They coordinate across infrastructure, application teams, security, compliance, and business leadership. They ask whether faster storage is worth the cost for a critical payment system. They challenge whether a legacy platform should receive expensive recovery investment or be downgraded with clear business acceptance. They build a roadmap for improving recovery over time.
Without that center of gravity, recovery stays fragmented. It only becomes visible when it is already failing. From there, the work becomes more practical. Organizations can define a small number of recovery blueprints and validate them repeatedly. One blueprint might cover rebuilding identity and access. Another might cover restoring cloud services in a new region. Another might cover restoring critical data stores in the correct order with clear validation checks.
Each pattern should be more than documented. It should be implemented, exercised, measured, and improved.
The metric should not simply be the number of successful backup jobs. The better metric is measured time to restore a named service using a defined recovery pattern during an actual exercise. Boards and regulators do not need every technical detail, but they do need evidence that recovery is being managed and improved like an essential service. The hard part is testing this in environments where uptime matters. That is where drills and game days become valuable. A useful exercise does not have to take down the whole business. It can start with targeted tests. Restore a critical application stack in a secondary environment. Rebuild identity services from backups in a controlled way. Simulate the first 3 hours of ransomware decision-making with the actual people who would be in the room. The goal is to surface hidden dependencies, brittle assumptions, unclear authority, and surprising bottlenecks while the stakes are still manageable. Over time, these exercises become cultural as much as technical. Teams get used to having their assumptions challenged. Runbooks improve because they are updated based on what really happened, not what people imagined would happen. Leaders learn which teams lean into discomfort and which ones try to avoid it. Recovery stops being a quiet checkbox and becomes a recurring leadership conversation, just like major product launches, infrastructure investments, or regulatory commitments. In that culture, ransomware is still painful, but it is less likely to become existential because the organization has already lived through smaller, controlled versions of the same story. At its core, backup betrayal is about the difference between believing you can recover and proving it repeatedly under conditions that resemble your worst day. Ransomware did not create that gap. It exposes it faster, louder, and under more public pressure. When your recovery plan is really just a collection of untested assumptions, your first major ransomware incident becomes the test. Your customers, employees, revenue, and reputation become the test subjects. No leader should be comfortable with that. Once you internalize this, the way you talk about resilience changes. We have backups is no longer the end of the conversation. It is the beginning. Which systems can you restore within defined time and data loss limits? What evidence supports that confidence? When was the last recovery exercise that made people genuinely uncomfortable? What changed afterward? You also stop treating backup infrastructure as a sleepy corner of operations. You treat it as part of the security perimeter. You monitor it, isolate it, test it, and govern it like the critical system it has become. The next time someone says, "We have backups," respond with curiosity instead of comfort. Ask which systems they mean. Ask how quickly they can be restored. Ask what the likely data loss would be. Ask when those claims were last proven in a real exercise. Those questions may feel awkward in a normal meeting, but they are far kinder than discovering the answers for the first time in the middle of a ransomware crisis.
That is how backup stops being a future betrayal and becomes a present-day asset, the organization can actually trust.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.